Good day and welcome to this tutorial video. If you're watching this video, that means you are interested in making weekly workflow rules on the ERS system. So by now you know how to make daily rules and get daily approvals on timesheets. You also know how to make employee confirmations on a daily basis and get those confirmed for the next day's timesheet. But what about payroll day? What about Monday and Tuesday when we need to authorize the payroll and process it? What about fill-up rules? How can we tell the system to apply fill-up rules? And what happens if on one account you have two different departments? One department needs 40 hours fill-up rules and the other department needs 45. How do we make that so? How do we send a weekly timesheet after that? And if the client needs to make changes, how do they make those changes? Where do they make those changes? How do we get those changes made? And when they do make changes, will the fill-up rules be reapplied when the new confirmation weekly sheet comes out to them? Also, what about ops and backing invoice documents? Ops are so used to having a printed timesheet that has a physical signature on it as to use as a backing document for their invoices. What are they going to use now that everything is electronic? And when everything has been authorized and the client is happy with everything, how do we tell the system to generate an export file either for WETS or for AX and send it to either payroll administrator or to the system directly? So these are all great questions and we're going to be tackling them in this TUT video. With this overview of the whole system, we're going to be dealing with this section that's been highlighted, and as you can see, it's a large portion of the system. And you're also going to see that I've included the daily timesheets, and no, that's not a mistake. I've done that on purpose, and you'll see just now when I show you the query timesheet for making weekly changes. You'll also see that I've included this web service element. Now, I have touched on this in the overview video, but just to touch on it again, you can think of a web service as a cargo department in an airport. If somebody wants to send a package to somebody in Cape Town, they send it via SAA to SAA Cargo from Johannesburg through to SAA Cargo in Cape Town. Then when that person in Cape Town is ready to get that package, they travel down to the airport, go to cargo and retrieve it from there and bring it back to wherever they need to bring it back to. That's much the same as a web service. The ERS system will create your export file and send it to the web service. Well, just sit there for a bit until AX is ready to pull it in. Then it'll go and get it, retrieve it, and pull it into AX. Okay, and that's what we call an FTP, file transfer protocol. When setting up weekly workflow steps, you'll first need to make a weekly workflow container. We did touch on that in the overview video. If you haven't seen that, please go and watch that. But when you've created that workflow container, you'll put the following steps inside it. You'll first put in a fill-up step. From there, you'll make a step that generates the weekly timesheet. And from there, you'll create a step that will grab onto that weekly timesheet and send it to one of your company contacts. The next step would be a step that will monitor for the receiving of that step. Now, from receiving that step, either that step will fail or it will be successful. Either receiving will fail. In that case, that means the client has sent back the timesheet but has requested changes. The receive has not been fully successful. Or it could be successful, and we'll get to that just now. But if it does fail, you need to set up a query timesheet, which is a daily timesheet just for a whole week, that will be sent should the receive step fail. Then once the query timesheet has been generated, you need a step to grab onto that timesheet and send it to a company contact, and then another step to monitor for it being received back. When the query timesheet has been received back with those corrections, the system, just know that the system will loop back to the fill-up rules, reapply the fill-up rules, and recreate a new weekly timesheet. Then send that and receive it, so on. If the weekly timesheet is received back and it's approved, sorry, not approved, if it's authorized, then you would need a PDF confirmation. You would want to send operations, maybe yourself, but importantly is the client, to send them PDF confirmation of that weekly timesheet to say this is what you've approved or this is what you've authorized. Then you need a step to send that, and you need a step to send that to whoever. Now you'd also need a step to export. Should the weekly timesheet come back as authorized, then you'd need a receive step, and the receive step was successful, then you'd need a step to export those times and send it to a payroll administrator or FTP it. So let's go have a look practically at the workflows. So I'm going to bring in this over here. And we're going to create a new workflow container for the weekly workflow. We're going to make it for the second ops department. Second ops, let's call it second ops payroll. Make it a weekly process that runs every Monday and is dependent on the second ops daily process. Okay, we save that. So as it's creating that, the containers, the next step would be the next process, next thing you would do is to open up that container, which is over here, and start adding those steps. Your first step would be, as discussed, is your fill up step, to grab onto the second, or to look at the full prior week. It's going to be the fill up step. We're going to run it at, we've got to also bear in mind that on a Monday we're also finishing up the daily timesheets. Let's say those daily timesheets should be done by about 11 o'clock on that day. So this fill up rules will only trigger at 11 o'clock. We're just going to name this the fill up, and it's going to be select view employee by cost center, and we're going to select second ops. You will have set up fill up rules. Now remember, these are weekly fill up rules. You should know by now that when you're setting up fill up rules, you have daily, weekly, and I think there's also a monthly fill up rule. You would select daily fill up rules, weekly fill up rules, and all your weekly fill up rules will be listed over here. So you select which one you want for the second ops group, and you finish that up. Okay. Next step would be to create the weekly timesheet, or what we call the offline weekly timesheet or split timesheet. It's this option over here, offline weekly split timesheet. Now the fill-ups are running at 11, so we want to run it maybe just a few minutes past 11. Give the system a bit of time. Depending on the fill-up step being successful, we want to view employee by cost center. We're going to call this weekly timesheet. For the second ops department, we want to show cost center position rate group. Separate hours, we don't want to separate hours into relevant groups. And on the Monday to Sunday columns, these are the combined. We want to see combined normal time, OT1 and OT2, and maybe also, no, that's about all we want. If you had PPHW on this account, those are worked hours, you probably want to put those in there as well. But we don't, it's capacity client, so we just go next. Finish that up. So now that we've told the system to create a weekly offline timesheet or weekly timesheet, we now need to tell the system to send that and who to send it to. So a new step here. It's going to be a send email step. We want to run that just after when the weekly timesheet is being generated. Maybe give it 3 minutes to generate. Depend on the weekly timesheet step being successful, and we want to view employee by cost center. We're going to call this send weekly timesheet. Send. Great. Now remember, there's going to be a message body here. You want to send it to your client, James McCullough. Yes, that's you, James. Say, good day, please see attached weekly summary timesheet for temp employees in the second ops department. Please, if corrections are required, comma, please request a query timesheet by marking the employees who need corrections. If you are happy with the hours, please approve timesheet and send back to auto@ersbiometrics.co.za. Awesome. Great, finish that step up. Now you're sending it to the client's going to make corrections and send it back. So we need a step to monitor for that timesheet coming back. We're going to call that a receive email step. That's going to run from about, let's say, 10 past, depending on the send workflow step. So whatever was sent, that's what the timesheet that's going to be looking for. Being successful, and sort by cost center. And it's a receive email step, so it doesn't need a second screen, a selection screen, just basic details. And when it's loaded, you just finish that up. There you go. Now, as I said, from here, let's just make that step correct. I haven't got a name there. It's basic details, and put in the name. Whoops, receive weekly TS. Alright, so as I said, when the client sends back the timesheet, they can do one of two things. They can either send back the timesheet to approve the times, or authorize the times. From there, you want to send them a confirmation as well as send an export file. But they could send back the timesheet requesting more changes. In this case, you need to have what we call the query timesheet, or the query daily timesheet. If you set up a daily timesheet in a weekly container, what the system will do is look at the previous 7 days and create a daily timesheet, for all 7 days. So that's what we're going to do now. If this receive weekly timesheet fails, which means the client has requested changes, then it's going to generate a query timesheet, a daily timesheet for the whole previous week. So let's go ahead and insert that step. So yeah, the query timesheet is going to be a daily timesheet, daily split timesheet. We're going to send that at, let's say, from about 1/4 it'll start generating. And that's going to be dependent on the receive email failing. Again, this will only trigger if the receive email fails. View employee by cost center, and we're going to say query timesheet. Over here, you're going to make selections much the same way as you selected the previous timesheet, so the previous daily timesheet in the daily rules. It's cost center, position, rate group. Don't want to separate. Looks good. Finish that up, and then let's make a send and a receive step, or send step and a receive step. Loading, new one. We want to send the email, and we're going to make that query timesheet. That's what it's wanting to send, and then by cost center. Want to send it to James because he's still the client. saying good, good day is already going to be in the email. This is after that. Please find attached query timesheet. Please make required changes and send back to system. Send back to system. Let's say fill up rules will then be reapplied to hours, and an updated weekly timesheet will be sent to you shortly. Finish that up and then make a receive email step to monitor for that to be coming back. Again, I've not given it a name. Send query timesheet. Fantastic. Alright, so we've got, so we're needing now a receive timesheet step, receive query timesheet step. Receive email, that's going to come in 11, let's also have it from 11:20 or so, give them a bit of time. Send query timesheets being successful, view employees by cost center, and that's receive query timesheet. So now we're finishing this up. What the system will do when it receives that query timesheet, the daily timesheet, it's going to, as you've probably already figured out at this point, it's going to cycle back. It's going to fill in those changes. It's going to go all the way back to the beginning, to the fill up step. Fill up, then recreate a new timesheet, resend it to the client so they can make those changes or make more changes, request more changes, or approve the timesheet. So what happens when they approve the timesheet? First thing we need to do is set up a step that creates a PDF version of that timesheet, and we'll send it to them. So the step would be PDF weekly split timesheet. That's going to generate start looking from, let's say, about 20 minutes past. Why not? And that's going to be dependent on the received weekly timesheet. If that was successful, then it's going to create this timesheet. So it's going to be called the PDF weekly confirm. Good. And remembering that this must be much the same as the original timesheet. It must be exactly the same, not much the same. So I selected second ops, selected cost center, position and rate group. I did not separate into relevant groups, and I selected those options. Right, so that's generating. Obviously, we need to grab what was generated and send it. You should know by now. So we need to send email option. That's going to go at, let's give it 2 minutes. Grab onto that PDF if it's successfully generated, view by cost center, and that's going to be send PDF weekly. Confirm. Fine. Good. You may want to rewrite this, knowing that those words are going to be in the email that the client receives, that the person receives. So you can word that however you want. Yeah, there's no standard operating procedure for what you put in there, but just realize that the client will see what you write there. James, I also want to get that timesheet because I need to attach it to my invoices, saying good day, please, or wait, thank you for approving temp employee hours for the second ops department. Please see attached PDF document of the hours you approved. Let's put that in capitals, PDF. Great. Then you finish that up. All right, so that's one of the two things that happens if the weekly timesheet comes back as approved or authorized. The second thing, obviously, you need to make an export step that will generate an export file for whatever payroll system you're using. This system is Axe, but you can select SAP or WET, provided that you've set up everything there that's needed. And that's going to start running from about 11:30. Again, if the client doesn't authorize their timesheet by 11:30, maybe they only do it in the afternoon, it's all right. The system will still, if it's 2 in the afternoon, this step will just be waiting till it's 11 o'clock. It's only going to start trying to generate from 11 o'clock. At 2 in the afternoon, if it's still trying to generate and only then the weekly report is approved, then it'll generate. It'll automatically generate, saying it's in the backlog. It's in the queue of functions that should have run but haven't yet completed. So don't you worry about that. You can just start running from 11:30. And that's going to be dependent on the receive weekly timesheet being successful, the cost center. That's going to be Axe export file. Already been written in a previous workflow that I made, so it's the wording options there. It's going to be for second ops. We don't want to combine hours because we don't really want to we don't want to summarize that file. This is not a client that requires that. Keep it in decimal. Allocate to extra fields. No, we don't want to separate hours. We want to have everything based on defaults because they don't shuffle around from group to group or position to position in a week. We want a CSV, and that's the date format that we want. Year, month, day. Fantastic. That's what we want. Let's finish that step up. Step up. So now we've created the export file. We need to send that export file. So one last step for the weekly processes. That's going to be the send email step. We're going to make that run from 11:32. Why not? And that's going to depend on the Axe export file being successful. View employee by cost center. Send Axe export. Send it to me, saying account 6091. Just expand that out a little bit. Account 6091. Workflow second ops weekly, and that's about it. Axe export file. Sure. Looks good. So when I read that email, I know exactly where it's coming from and what it's for. So there you have it. There's your weekly steps. Let's go back to setting workflows. Now, when it comes to combining export files, maybe you have the second ops department as a workflow and the plating and the inspection department. Those workflows mustn't be sent to Axe separately. You want to combine them all together. In that situation, you would need to create a separate export workflow container. So you'd go to your containers, go new workflow, call it the export or payroll export. That's going to run on a weekly basis. Let's say it runs on a Tuesday just to be safe. So that Monday, you can make it dependent on the second ops, but you can only really make it dependent on one of the 3 workflows. So choose that wisely, the problem department, make it that. The worst case scenario is it runs and sends an export file to your payroll department before everything has been authorized, or there's changes afterwards. It's not a stress. If that does happen, you can always reprocess a step. It's not the end of the world if it does send. You just need to cancel that import. Cancel that export file that was sent to Axelwet. So there you have it, whole site export for Tuesday. You'll need only 2 steps here. Let's say, sorry, that's probably something that I've made previously. Let's just delete it so we can start from the beginning. Then we're going to make a new workflow to generate the Axe export file. I'm going to say it's Tuesday, it's the day after everything should be authorized. Let's just make that run at 9 in the morning. The cost center. Let's say all the hours for second ops, autos, inspection. Let's just say the whole site. The whole site needs to be exported together. You don't want to have combined hours. You want to have decimal hours, all hours, CSV. Fantastic. Once it's loaded, then you need to make a step that will grab that file and send it to whoever you want to send it to. There you go. So that's going to be a send email step. That's going to run just after 902 is fine for me. And it's going to be based on the successful generation of that Axe export file. Employee by cost center, send Axe export to me. That's going to be account 6091 Ryan Mittel whole site Axe export file. Good. And there you have it. There's your Axe export file for the whole site. So if you have a look at all your workflows here, you'll have your daily workflows that run over here. And when they are done, then the weekly workflows will kick in and start generating and authorizing times from the client. Then on the Tuesday, the whole site export will kick in and say, grab all the times for the whole site, send it to somebody. So there is your payroll right there. All right. So there you have it. There is the weekly workflow rules for the ERS process. So now you can sit back and have a relatively stress-free Monday and Tuesday while you let the system deal with all the client's nonsense. If the client gets frustrated, they only have themselves to blame because they maybe are leaving, or the operations as well, they only have themselves to blame because they're leaving corrections too late, or they're making corrections in the wrong way. So now you're able to apply fill-up rules to different employees, different section employees, different fill-up rules to different employees. You can make changes on the weekly rules. You can also export the whole site together. You don't have to export one workflow rule individually. You can if you want, if that's the requirements, but if you don't need that, you're welcome to make one export rule for the whole site. Great, so please carry on to the next tutorial video, which is covering the weekly reports, the weekly timesheets themselves. Also, as you can imagine in the previous other similar type videos, this is a client or ops facing tutorial video. So it's mainly looking at them as the people that will be mainly dealing with these timesheets. So please bear that in mind when you see who I'm addressing. It is the intention that you give that video to them as part of their training. So they'll view the video, and then you would coach them after the video on how to use these timesheets and make sure they fully understand how to do it. So I hope this has been helpful, and thank you for watching.